Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Getting around North County is now going to take a lot more time, and it might stay that way for a while. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and that is the latest consequence of the heavy rain that hit San Diego this week. Those who rely on the 78 to get to I-5 will find part of the freeway shut down. The problem is with damage done to the freeway that made it too dangerous to drive. KPBS reporter Claire Strong shows us what happened.
Another day, another sinkhole, this time in Oceanside, where a broken 50-year-old pipe has caused a huge one off State Route 78. The westbound lanes from College Boulevard to El Camino Real have been shut down, and traffic's being diverted while crews work around the clock to repair the damage.
So all of the storms that we had over the last 2 weeks, and then even before that, and going up as far back to November of this year, we've got an extraordinary amount of rain, and that's caused an acceleration of the failure.
A few miles away in Vista, and residents of Green Valley Mobile Home Park are figuring out where they're going to be sleeping tonight after a dramatic start to their day.
Well, I woke up this morning and I saw a text from my neighbor across the street, and she had texted me telling me that she thought the hill behind her house was moving. They've evacuated the entire hillside side of our street, and I'm also evacuated. I live directly across the street from her, and I will be staying somewhere tonight until we're sure that it's safe to come home.
Cruz was one of 17 people and 7 pets who were rescued from the park by first responders due to a sinkhole and flooding. That was just before 7:30 a.m. And just yesterday, KPBS News reported on a sinkhole on Lake Drive in Cardiff. It's causing traffic issues there due to the diversion. Back in Oceanside, and Caltrans says the affected lanes on the 78 will be closed through Saturday. Drivers are being urged to be patient.
So during storms, during rains, you're going to see, Caltrans maintenance workers, our contractors working out on the roads. Slow down, move over, respect them. We really want everybody to go home at the end of every shift, and we want the driving public not to have any accidents or collisions.
Most people have a place.
A long wait could be in store for Cruz and his fellow neighbors at Green Valley Mobile Home Park. They're not sure when they'll be able to return home.
My kitty is the one that I'm more concerned about because he's mostly an indoor cat. My neighbor's thankfully looking after him and got him in a separate room. So I'm grateful. Could have been worse.
Claire Strong, KPBS News.
In recent weeks, we've reported on the snow that left mountain communities isolated. As the situation eases, another risk is developing. Rena Nakano has the latest from Big Bear.
People in Big Bear dealing with a whole lot of water. Streets flooded by melted snow.
There's a river flowing right down the middle of my house.
We saw many residents hustling to collect sandbags from Fire Station 282 to save their own homes.
We have a lot of snow, melted snow coming down, and we're trying to divert it so it doesn't flood out their yards.
We followed Casey Powderly to the Sky Valley Estates neighborhood. The field near her backyard had turned into a creek, bringing with it waves of water, threatening many of her neighbors' homes.
Oh, we've just been trying to get anything we can, wood, sandbags, stuff out of the forest, timber, whatever, just to block things off.
Phil Harwood says his garage flooded on Saturday, but just as he cleaned it up, another wave came rushing through Wednesday morning. That's when neighbors like Powderly came to the rescue.
Neighborhoods coming together is wonderful.
Wonderful teamwork, but Harwood says they can only do so much as Mother Nature proves to be relentless with this storm.
We need a couple of pet beavers right now.
Communities all across our area are getting a chance to dry out. Some got several inches of rain, which broke some records. Coming up, we'll have our weekend forecast and the chance of more rain heading our way. Nurses at UC San Diego Health say they need help. They say they're working with too many patients and not enough resources in the emergency room. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman has the story.
What do we want? When do we want it?
ER nurses at UCSD Health's La Jolla Hospital are calling out what they say are unsafe and overcrowding conditions.
This is not the care we want for our patients or for our own families.
Estefania Urbano is an emergency room nurse who says she worries about treating patients in hallways, especially those that might be immunocompromised.
This is humiliating for patients, and most importantly, a possible infectious risk to others.
UCSD health officials say they have been very busy, seeing historically high amounts of patients. A statement from the hospital says the unprecedented demand is outpacing available hospital beds, especially in the emergency room. They say they're taking every measure possible to care for patients. Sometimes that means resorting to using overflow areas or even diverting ambulances because of demand.
I have not seen anything like this. It has been progressively getting worse, and to the point that now we need to stand up and request for more attention.
Jocelyn Beleza is an ER nurse who's been with UCSD Health for 20 years. She and others say the situation is not sustainable and some staff are burning out.
A few years ago, it was very hard to get a job in the emergency department because nobody left. Now it's hard to keep the job because everybody keeps leaving. There's a high increase in burnout when you don't have any kind of support. And there's a lot of low morale among the staff.
March has been particularly busy at UCSD La Jolla. There's been 2 instances where an internal disaster was declared. That means ambulances aren't able to bring in patients. It happened on March 2nd for 22 hours and on March 7th for 18 hours. Emergency room nurses and the union representing them are calling for more nurses and other support staff. They say management has brought in some extra help, but it hasn't been enough.
All of my coworkers and the staff, as I said, are doing our best. We love our job, but at the same time, we need the space, we need the equipment, we need all the support that we can get from the management.
UCSD health officials say when possible, they're adding additional nurses. They're also reminding the public that minor health issues can be handled with same-day visits to urgent care or even telehealth conferences. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The San Diego County District Attorney's Office is dealing with hundreds of requests for new criminal sentences. It's the result of new state laws aimed at criminal justice reform. But prosecutors say the move allows victims to be traumatized all over again. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado has the story.
Rene Ruiz has been sentenced to 15 years to life for a DUI crash that killed a woman in 2018. But last week, he was resentenced to 15 years with credit for time served. He's just one of the cases affected by Senate Bill 1437, which made it possible for people convicted of crimes to petition to be resentenced. The district attorney's office says the new law is bogging down a system that is already overwhelmed. It's already received more than 525 petitions from inmates requesting resentencing under this new law this year alone. But more than that, the DA says families will be re-traumatized by having to go back to court.
I just feel for those families who have to go back in there. They probably thought finally that part of their day-to-day life was over.
Laura Keenan's husband, Matt, was killed by a wrong-way driver in 2021. She says she can relate to some of what these families will have to go through because she's in the middle of a sentencing process that has been painful because of a sentence that will be reduced to 4 days.
It's a feeling of utter injustice. You know, for me and anybody who has lost a loved one, anybody who's had a loved one killed, really, that that person's life is so important. My husband, Matt, was one of the most incredible people I ever knew.
But she says she can't imagine doing it again.
The criminal system made a decision, and whatever that was, they had to live with it. And now they're having to reface all that again. They'll probably have to see the person who killed their loved one again. For me, that's one of the toughest things.
The DA says thousands of the cases will qualify for reduced sentencing, and cases include murder and sexual assault. But criminal defense attorney Jan Ronis says this is also about making a justice system that is fair for everyone, and that hasn't always been the case.
We put too many people in too many prisons for too long at enormous cost to the taxpayers. And although somewhat inconvenience perhaps to prosecutors to have to relitigate these issues, it's far more burdensome to have prisons running at 200% capacity, 250% capacity. So on balance, this is a fair and just approach to restore equity in sentencing in California.
He says he has several clients going through the process now, and one who he says was young was over-sentenced. Ronis says that client was released and now is getting a second chance.
These laws that are now designed to perhaps give people a second chance will make us a better society going forward.
But Keenan says victims' families are not only forgotten, but are being re-victimized by these laws.
I really believe that victims' families and victims should be at the core of how we decide our laws. And unfortunately, we are third parties to the system, and that's not the way it should be. Victims and victims' families deserve better.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
We saw yesterday that San Diego Unified teachers are considering a strike over how they're compensated. Now California's largest school district might be facing a similar challenge. Lori Perez tells us about the strike threat for LA Unified and just how little some of those essential workers are being paid.
If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down.
And so they will.
Get ready, because we're going to be on the line Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
At a massive rally in downtown LA, the district's two largest unions, UTLA representing teachers and SEIU's non-teaching workers, including bus drivers, custodians, and special ed aides, announced they will together walk out unless the district responds to SEIU's demands after months of negotiations, including
we're demanding fully staffed schools so that students have the support they need from school nurses, teacher librarians, counselors, psychiatric social workers.
Pay is also one of the biggest issues. SEIU wants a 30% raise, saying the average salary for its LAUSD members is $20,000 a year.
And 1 in 4 SEIU 99 members report that they don't even have enough to eat. Yet they're preparing the food for the students at the school.
For me, I only work 3.5 hours a day, so therefore I definitely need to get more hours and stuff so I can pay for I have 2 kids. It's expensive. And 3.5 hours for getting paid for what I get paid is not enough to take care of a family.
The district says it's offered a 15% raise over time and 10% up front. The superintendent says the union has not countered. And earlier today, before the strike announcement, said,
let's go to the table. Let's stay at the table. Whatever time, whatever place, until such time as a solution is reached.
But tens of thousands of workers in Grant Park said the district's time is up.
We demand respect!
And that was Lori Perez reporting. Yesterday on KPBS Evening Edition, education reporter MG Perez reported on some of the picketing here in San Diego by local teachers. You can get caught up on that story at kpbs.org and the KPBS YouTube page. It's a good day to be an Aztec as the SDSU's men's basketball team advances in the March Madness tournament. SDSU beat the College of Charleston this afternoon in their opening round game in Orlando. Final score was 63-57. Matt Bradley led the Aztecs with 17 points. Up next is a game Saturday against Furman University. The NCAA has not yet announced a start time. Another win will send SDSU to the Sweet 16, and the last time they advanced that far in the tournament was 2014. And there's a lot more on the Aztec basketball schedule right here in San Diego. The SDSU women's team are in the NIT tournament. They practiced a bit this morning, and we'll have a larger story on them coming up tomorrow. SDSU will host UC Irvine for an elimination game Friday night at 6 at Viejas Arena. Endangered Pacific humpback whales got a legal victory this week. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says advocates are pressing for changes to commercial fishing practices.
A federal court in California says government officials are not doing enough to protect the large mammals from fishing lines. Commercial fishing operations trying to catch bottom-dwelling fish use long ropes to connect the fishing pots on the ocean floor to buoys on the surface. Humpbacks can get tangled in the ropes that connect the two, and it happens as often as 25 times a year.
Not only is it a horribly painful, traumatic, and often deadly experience for these individual animals, but it is preventing their recovery.
Whales can be rescued, but the process is difficult and only happens if humans spot the entangled mammal. Munsell says losing even one whale is tragic.
They often breach, so they'll jump out of the water and you can see them splash. They sing songs in their breeding grounds. I mean, they're just amazing, amazing creatures.
Munsell says there are alternatives for the fishing industry that are safer for whales. The long lines could be removed from the water when humpbacks arrive for the summer. The industry could also use gear that brings the fishing pots up from the ocean floor without using ropes. The Center for Biological Diversity sued the federal government because the nation's fisheries managers didn't have a plan to reduce the risk of entanglements, and they said federal officials did not consider developing the plan an urgent matter. The court agreed.
The plain language of the Marine Mammal Protection Act prohibits the agency from authorizing fisheries to kill endangered whales without a plan to reduce those harms.
Federal officials declined to comment on the ruling, saying they don't discuss litigation. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Looks like we'll catch a bit of a break between the atmospheric rivers, so some rather tranquil weather ahead through the weekend. Look at that, we're generally dry right through Sunday, and temperatures will be milder over the weekend, Saturday into Sunday. But don't get used to it. Rain could return as early as Monday, then get a little bit heavier into Tuesday and perhaps Wednesday as that atmospheric river approaches. For tonight in the metro, just some clouds. Our low right around 50 degrees. And as we take a look at temperatures around the area, certainly worthy of a nice warm jacket. Temperatures in the upper 30s in Ramona, mid-40s Escondido to El Cajon, and Oceanside at 46. And looking at that future cast, well, we don't really see any precipitation out there. There's plenty of clouds around, that's for sure. That as we take you through the night and the morning hours on your Friday. Don't see anything to be concerned about precipitation-wise. So as we take a look at that forecast for tomorrow, Getaway Friday, looking pretty nice. Temperatures still a little bit cool for some. Oceanside 63, San Diego 63, Ramona's at 66, but Borrego Springs cracked 70 degrees, 74. And then looking ahead, unfortunately, here we go again. Yet another atmospheric river, and that'll be arriving early next week. So just a heads up on that one. So here's our extended forecast. Dry through the weekend, a little bit milder. And then next week we start to get wet again, Monday into Tuesday. As we take you inland, temperatures are climbing to the 70s on Saturday, and then see the soggy weather early next week. Taking you up into the mountains, well, temperatures will be hovering in the low 40s. It'll be dry, a little cool. Then the winds increase next week, and we'll see some rain moving in. And in the deserts, we'll see temperatures in the mid-70s next couple of days, and then showers and wind for early next week. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
It's something to think about for anyone considering, in addition to their family, the number of mothers dying due to complications from pregnancy or childbirth is up. Gloria Pasmino tells us what the latest data means and what could be causing the trend.
Women in the United States are dying from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes at an alarming rate, with the number of maternal deaths rising to more than 1,200 in 2021.
Sadly, I don't think it's surprising that we see this spike.
A new report from the CDC reveals there were nearly 33 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2021, a sharp increase from years earlier.
We definitely saw that we were seeing sicker patients during this time.
The maternal death rate has been steadily rising for decades.
During 2021, we saw the Delta variant, which was predominant, which really affected pregnant people, both in terms of maternal outcomes, but also pregnancy outcomes.
The report also notes significant continued racial disparities. The maternal death rate for Black women was 2.6 times the rate for white women, mirroring the impact of the pandemic on communities of color and further highlighting inequality within healthcare.
People who are black or Hispanic were disproportionately affected by the COVID pandemic. And, that disparity now is presenting itself in maternal death rates as well.
To prevent future maternal deaths, Dr. Tori Metz says improving access to care at every level is critical.
And now it's really talking to people in these communities and asking, what are the barriers to care? How can we help? I think that people are really starting to think in those directions.
I'm Gloria Pasmino reporting.
Once again, there's movement toward a potential ban of TikTok in the U.S. The Biden administration says it wants the social network to have fewer ties with China. TikTok's parent company is being asked to spin off its share of the platform. TikTok is one of the most popular mobile apps right now, with 100 million users in the U.S. The Biden administration says the company could be pressured into giving personal information about those users to the Chinese government. Players of the game Fortnite might be due some money. The Federal Trade Commission is ordering the company Epic Games to pay users $245 million. The issue is with the in-game features where players were tricked into making unwanted or unauthorized purchases. In some cases, accounts were locked when the charges were disputed with credit card companies. Marines and service members from several other countries gathered at Camp Pendleton for the Marine Corps trials. The event was hosted by the Marine Corps' Wounded Warrior Regiment. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer was there.
The clanging of metal on metal from wheelchairs colliding reverberates through the Page Field House on Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton. Active duty Marines and veterans are playing wheelchair rugby. It's one of several adaptive sports included in the Marine Corps trials, which were held at the base last week.
It's still a pretty rough sport, even when in the wheelchair. The wheelchairs are built to take the beating, but wheelchair rugby is a contact sport.
Got you. I got you. Master Sergeant Dorian Gardner wheels his chair up and down the basketball court, which serves as the field for the game. The tall, athletic Marine works in public affairs at Camp Pendleton, but today, Gardner plays defense, maneuvering his chair to cut off attacking players, sometimes violently.
So the chairs are designed specifically to take impact. They're heavier chairs built to endure the kind of contact that they're going to get during the game, but there's defensive chairs, there's offensive chairs.
Like all the athletes competing at the trials, Gardner lives with a disability. In 2010, on patrol in Delaram, Afghanistan, the Marine beside Gardner triggered an IED. Gardner took much of the blast and was medevaced out. He lost his left eye, leaving him legally blind. Gardner says many people at the time encouraged him to leave the Marines and take a medical retirement, but he wasn't ready to give up on his Marine Corps goals.
I mean, the Marine Corps is day in and day out, it's a tough go, but doing it with limited vision and having to be very reliant on others for aid day to day made things a bit tougher. But I was determined to prove to myself and to everybody who doubted me that I could still do this job, that I could still be a Marine.
Gardner began competing in adaptive sports in 2017. He says returning to competition taught him a lot about himself.
I used to be a basketball player, and I gave that up. There's not much room for basketball when your depth perception's gone, and the vision loss made that really hard to just play. So when I came to the trials in 2017, I was introduced to adaptive sports, and I was exposed to discus and shot put and swimming and things I'd never competed in before, but things I excelled at. I discovered that there are still so many things I can do. After thinking to myself, life is over, adaptive sports really opened my eyes and showed me there are so many things I could still do regardless of my injury.
The trials are not just about friendly competition. The competitors are vying for spots in the Warrior Games. That's where members of all the service branches compete against each other. From there, a select number will go on to the Invictus Games, which is a global adaptive sports competition with the best athletes from militaries around the world. Daniel Norman plays adaptive rugby as an attacker. He's a Marine veteran who competed in the Invictus Games before and is trying to get back again this year.
I do powerlifting, that's the one I'm really good at, rowing and track, so I'm a sprinter too.
Norman was injured during a training exercise with the Scout Sniper Platoon in Japan. He says his favorite team sport is wheelchair rugby, and while he's friends with everyone off the court, things get serious once the whistle blows.
We're competitive, we're Marines, we're competitive by nature, we want to win. So, as these are all Marines, they're all my friends, I love them to death, but when they're on an opposite team, we go ham, we go hard.
If we're going down offense, we can only be in the box if we're getting ready to score.
Gardner is nearing his military retirement, but says his athletic goals don't end with Invictus.
My 20-year mark is going to be hitting this October, so going to be packing it up and retiring after 20 years. But that's when the training is going to start. I'm hoping to get to Paris for the 2024 Paralympics and compete as a shot put thrower, hopefully discus as well, and try my hand at parasurfing. That's the goal.
Gardner won gold in shot put and archery, and Norman took the gold in the 100 meters, powerlifting, wheelchair basketball, and wheelchair rugby. The Warrior Games are scheduled to be held at Naval Air Station North Island in June. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.